Hey everyone, I'm David Schloss, the editor of Imaging Resource. The A7CR review that you're about to watch originally appeared on my own personal channel. But since the Sony RX1R Mark III just shipped and so many people are comparing it to the A7CR, I thought that I'd post this here as well. If you want to take a look at my rant about the RX1R Mark III, you can check that out over here. If you have any questions about the two cameras, let me know in the comments below. I will do my best to answer them. Alrighty, let's get to the video. So there's a Safari vehicle behind me, and that's because on the other side of the Safari vehicle is a Jaguar. And the Jaguar's sleeping in the woods right now, but we stopped to have a snack. And so we're all hiding behind this vehicle while we have our snacks, hoping that we don't become a snack for a Jaguar. The reason that I'm out here in the Pantanal in Brazil with Natural Habitat, not a sponsorship, I just love the company, is that I'm testing the Sony A7CR. The Sony A7CR is sort of like a bulldog version of the Sony A7R5. It's got the same sensor as the Sony A7R5, but it's in this compact little body. There are definitely compromises in this body, but that said, the A7CR is still, for my money, the absolute best travel camera that you can get right now, bar none. It takes the high-resolution backside illuminated sensor of the A7R5 and it puts it inside a much smaller travel body. In fact, I've got the silver model right now, and the great thing about the silver model is that it doesn't look like a fancy camera. You've got this tiny camera, but you have some of the best autofocus recognition ever made in this camera, and it just looks like a consumer little camera. In fact, you could just put a tiny lens on the front of it, like I did when I walked around in Sao Paulo, and it doesn't look like you've got a professional camera at all. Now, usually when I come to do a shoot like this, I'll test out the new camera for a couple days, and then I'll go back to shooting my main camera, which in this case was the A7R5 that my son Henry is shooting, but I didn't switch back to it. I enjoyed working the A7CR, and it performed so well that I stuck to shooting the A7CR the whole time. So those birds indicate that the Jaguars are getting closer, which means I'm going to get back on the vehicle so that you don't have to watch me die on YouTube. Let's go take a look at some of the images and videos, and then I'll talk to you more about what I think about this camera when I get back to the studio.
This is why we come here. This is a core area for Jaguars, right? Cool. Sorry.
Oh. We just spotted this Jaguar in fields. Unbelievably beautiful. She's a nursing mother. She's been out for at least a half an hour hunting. It's incredible. That was crazy. We just got off the boat. We saw so many Jaguars. We watched this Jaguar from a couple of feet away as it was falling asleep. That was crazy. Gotta get some food now. Let's go get something to eat, and then let's go transfer some images. Okay, we're on our way to dinner. Check this out.
Capybara.
God, I want to pet them so badly. I'm back in the studio now after I spent nearly 2 weeks shooting with the A7CR in Brazil, which is a really long time in pre-release camera testing. I also have a lot of experience with the A7R5. I own one of those, so I have a lot of thoughts about this camera. It's definitely not perfect, but I'll tell you why I think it's such a good camera. I'm going to say a bunch of nice things about this camera and then a bunch of not so nice things about this camera. The A7CR is the A7R5 in a small travel-friendly package. Or look at it another way, it's an A7R5 for about $1,000 less. It's got the same AI-based autofocus system as the A7R5. It's got the same video quality of the A7R5. It also has the same battery as the A7R5, which is really important in a travel camera. But that doesn't mean it's perfect. In fact, a few things about the A7CR drove me incredibly crazy, and one of them will make some people avoid this camera altogether. There is only a single card slot in the A7CR. Are you okay? Take all the time you need for this one. Pause the video, get a drink, come back, hit the subscribe button, and we'll keep going. Okay, welcome back. A single card slot is one of the most common trade-offs when you squeeze a much more expensive camera into a much tinier body. Usually a single card slot in a travel camera isn't something that bothers me much. I've been photographing with professional digital cameras since I had the Nikon D1 in 1999, and that time I've had 5 card failures. That's a problem with a memory card once every 4.6 years, and only one of those was a problem where I lost all of the data on the card. The other 4 were instances where the card stopped writing and stopped displaying images, but the photos and the videos were fine on the card and could be easily recovered. One of those instances happened on this trip. I only noticed a problem with the card when I was trying to switch from photo to video in the camera, and it warned me that it was still processing images and I'd have to wait. I tried to play back images there in the boat, but the camera wouldn't read the card. I swapped quickly to one of the many cards I brought with me on the trip, and then when I got back to my room, I found that it had like die, but not like die.
It just so happens that your friend here is only mostly dead.
So do what you'd like with that information. If you shoot a single card slot camera right now, you're no worse off with this camera, but you're also no better off either. I've always owned travel cameras. Each of these were small and unassuming, but took fantastic images, at least for their era. But they've never been my perfect camera.
All I want is the perfect camera.
I think a travel camera needs a high-resolution sensor big enough to crop images without losing much detail, autofocus good enough to rarely miss shots, and a frame rate fast enough to capture whatever action is in front of me. I also need ergonomics that make it comfortable to use, and a body small enough that it won't really be noticed when I'm walking around somewhere where I don't want people to see I've got an expensive camera. In the last few years, I've added the ability to take great video to the stream camera list, but the Sony a7CR hits all of these for me, except for ergonomics, which I will get into in the section about things that I dislike about this camera. Sony also released the a7C II, and it's a nice camera, and it's better at low light conditions than the a7CR, but personally I'd rather have the extra crop ability of the high-res sensor and the extra reach of that, and I'll show you why in a minute. Now, let me talk to you about the features I love on this camera while I show you some of the images and videos that I captured with the a7CR that I believe are thanks to those very same features. I shot most of the wildlife, including these adorable capuchin monkeys with a Sigma 60-600mm lens, but the cropping ability of the sensor allowed me to get as close as if I was shooting with an 800mm or longer. A lot of people switch over to APS-C mode in order to get a crop that they can see in the camera in order to get a little more reach. I like to shoot a little bit wider and then crop because I feel like if I have more information rather than less, I can choose where I want my crop points to be. This toucan gathering seeds for a potential mate was hundreds of meters away, and this tree he flew to deliver his present was even farther and even higher. Yet it tracked the eyeball on this really peculiar looking bird with no problem at all. The potential mate spit the seed out and flew away, by the way. It is hard out here for a bird. This is also a good example of the image stabilization of the Sony a7CR. Sony says it's about 7 stops, and the Sigma 60-600 has optical image stabilization. Between the two of them, I was able to handhold this 5.5-pound lens, which is nearly 2,500 grams, while on a rocking boat, and I was still able to capture sharp images of birds hundreds of meters away. There's plenty of resolution to crop in on these images as well. I also love the a7CR for the astounding detail that comes from the 60-megapixel sensor. This male jaguar is named Acerola. This is at the Cayman Ecological Refuge, and while Acerola can and occasionally does walk up to the safari vehicles, this was taken at 600mm, and it's got enough data that I could print the size of a safari vehicle itself, and you would see every hair on his head. Another shot that I feel really shows off the resolving power of the a7CR is this giant river otter which is chowing down on some fresh fish like it was a burrito if a burrito had a head. The resolution makes it great for landscape photography too. Here's one of my favorite shots from the trip. It's the safari vehicle at sunset. And look at the detail in these pink trumpet trees. Of course, on the other side of the high megapixel equation is the amount of noise in high ISO images. There's obviously more noise in the a7CR than the a7C II has, but it's still manageable. And it's a lot less of an issue now that AI-based noise reduction tools have gotten so good. I sometimes use Luminar Neo for my noise reduction, and I will link to a Luminar Neo video that I made down here. And now there's amazing AI-based noise reduction in Lightroom where it's possible to bring back a lot of information and get rid of a lot of the noise. But it's still no slouch when it comes to low light. Here's an ISO 1250 shot with the Sony 2470 GM2 at 1/30th of a second. More important in this camera than resolution is the autofocus in the a7CR. This is Sony's AI-based autofocus system, and it's just amazing. You've already seen how well the animal eye detection works with this Jaguar, but here's another example of that. This is from a sequence where the camera was tracking the Jaguar moving in and out of the vegetation, and here it is tracking the closed eye of the Jaguar. But it's not just animals that look kind of like domestic pets that it can track. IAF for birds is particularly impressive. This is a time-lapse video from a sequence of images I shot, and I know it's jumpy footage, but that's part of what I think is impressive. I was struggling to keep track of this raptor, which was very far away and flew from in front of me to behind me, so I had to rotate around very quickly so that the camera had to track not only the movement of the bird, but deal with my erratic movement as well. It also nailed the focus on this lesser Kiskadee, even though the eye is a tiny spot on the side of its head. Same thing with this Kokoi heron. And this Jabiru is at more than 500 meters away with sticks and leaves in the foreground, something that would normally confuse a lot of cameras. Then there's this raptor eating what's left of a frog, and this bird eating a lot of a frog, and this adorable caracara that came to say hello outside my room in the mornings. And it stayed locked on the caracara even when the vulture popped into the frame. These guys were leaving, by the way, because a jaguar was in the bush nearby. Here's a jabiru and a chick that had picked out hundreds of meters away at sunset. And this bird is a yellow-bellied Cessna. All right, it's not a bird, obviously, but it's an example of the plane detect autofocus. Look at that.
Wow.
It's just drawing around the plane. And watch, wait, no, watch. No, watch. I'm going to move to the other plane, and it's still going to say sticky on the first plane. And look, there's people going across it. It jumps to them, and then look at that. Oh, here we go. Some other autofocus examples were with this anteater, which is like if you took a horse and an elephant and smushed them together with an Afghan dog, or an Afghan rug, either way. It also had no problem picking out the eye on this scary-ass prehistoric monster. As I mentioned, these cameras can shoot in the 10-bit HEIF or HEIF format, but it can also shoot in a smaller 8-bit format as well. The other thing that this camera has, and now I think is vital to a good travel camera, is the ability to record in multiple RAW sizes. There's compressed and uncompressed RAWs, and there's also a lossless compressed files. But now there's 3 sizes of RAW, small, medium, and large. I used the medium RAW when I wanted a smaller file size than a 60 megapixel sensor would normally create, but I didn't mind having a smaller amount of data to work with. Little travel details like this coffee pour over that uses a small net to hold the ground coffee is a good example. I don't need a 60 megapixel file of this to capture the information. For video shooters, this is a powerhouse with robust 4K recording, breathing compensation, subject recognition, autofocus, power over USB for continual shooting, separate menus for photo and video settings, and so much more. The only thing I wish it had on the video side was a full-size HDMI port, but this is something I'm not really upset about. Some other things I particularly like about this are the full-size battery and the good battery life and the comfortable grip. At least it's comfortable for a small camera. Okay, so now let's talk about some of the things that I either don't like about this camera or that I really don't like about this camera. The card slot example I gave at the beginning of the video is the biggest con, but it's related to a category of small and large issues in ergonomics. Some of these issues are nitpicky, but together they were almost enough to make me put the camera down for good. One small thing is that the PASM dial doesn't lock. It's possible to switch between modes accidentally, although it does take a good amount of effort, and a lot of camera systems have this much worse. Another big one for me is that the on-screen menu that provides quick access to features like shutter speed, exposure compensation, and ISO stays on the screen while you're shooting with the viewfinder, and I keep bumping the exposure compensation setting with my nose. Which is kind of funny because the reason that the exposure compensation dial got removed on the camera in the first place is because people would accidentally change it. Why does my nose bump the screen, you ask? Well, first of all, it's a pretty large nose. This gets us to the larger issues. Get it? Larger issues. First, like the A7C and Sony's APS-C cameras, like the A6700. You can find my review of that camera up here. The viewfinder is on the left of this camera. This design allows for smaller cameras, as a viewfinder in the middle kind of has to move up to be out of the way of the lens mount hardware. So the EVF is designed to keep the body small, but a side-mounted EVF is such a bad shooting experience. It's particularly bad on the A7CR because the EVF resolution is so low, and because the effective size of the EVF is much smaller than a central mounted finder that's bigger, like on the A7R5. This gets me to a bigger problem, which is that there is no joystick on the back of the camera. I will say this also with every camera review. On a camera without a joystick, put a joystick on every camera. They are so valuable, they should be ubiquitous in photography. Now you can say AF should be good enough to pick out your subject, and we're getting close to the time when AF can pick out just about anything you might want to photograph. But when you want to pick out one subject from a group of subjects, you need to be able to place the AF selector box over the one subject you want. Now you can make a small point. You want to put the point on the one bird you're interested in and the flock of birds, the one player on a football team that you want to photograph, one of the 2 brides at a wedding. That's not a joke. That's a valid concern for wedding photographers. Sony says that we can just use the LCD screen as a joystick, and yeah, sure you can, but if you've ever played video games, you know that joysticks are so much more accurate than a touchscreen. That's why every video game system has a joystick, and why even touchscreen systems like the Switch and like the iPhone have joysticks that are available. It took me a long time, but I finally got the LCD screen set up to almost kind of be able to use it. I set the top right quarter of the screen to be a focus point touchpad with relative but not absolute tracking, and I had a main center point as the default autofocus detection point. And it still did not work as well as a joystick, by far. Oh, one funny thing about ergonomics, Sony also provided this utterly ridiculous little grip extender, which I don't understand, but that's it. These are my negatives, and the negatives are common among cameras designed with small size as their highest priority. So luckily, if you're more interested in EVF, ergonomics, dual card slots, and a bigger grip, then the A7R5 is available for you with the same autofocus and the same sensor for about $1,000 more. But on the other hand, it means if you want the A7R5's resolution and are willing to make some sacrifices, the A7CR also gives you the best image quality possible for about $1,000 less. I'll have a second video that's just a slideshow of images from the A7CR I took on the trip to Brazil, so you can check those out. A link to that will be in the description. Is this your idea of a perfect travel camera? And if not, what would you want for that perfect camera?
All I want is the perfect camera.
There it is again. Let me know in the comments what you think about this camera. Would you buy it? Is the single card slot a deal killer for you, or is there something else about this camera that overrides that? If you want to see more of my honest camera reviews, you can do that, over here. And if you'd like to subscribe, you can do that over there.